Alright guys, Halawax here, back in my basement. And tonight we're going to go over the final finishes of the V2. We're going to cover TrooperTrent's gaffer tape adapter, installing the D-ring, installing the mystery chunk, and the fishing line. So let's set up the workbench and get to it. Okay, so this is TrooperTrent's gaffer's tape adapter. First you want to find the end that's smaller to fit over the wind vane, and you're going to take a knife and just slowly clean the whole edge of it. And, I mean, take your time while doing this, because you're gonna you want it to fit tolerant tight, but you don't want to shove it on there and break it. So it takes some time to sand it until it actually pops right on. So I wouldn't use a Dremel or anything on this. I would just use the knife like Trent recommends. Every single one that I've put on, I've done this way, and his instructions worked. So just follow his steps. Okay, so now that we've sanded this inside, and I recommend doing it with the razor blade like Trent says, because if you remove too much, it'll spin. You don't want the bottom spin, you want the bottom to hold it in place, only to allow the top to spin. So there is an orientation to this, and this edge of the gaffer's tape adapter should be in line with the second wave over here. So we have this little dip here next to the mushroom over here. This little dip, wave 1, wave 2. So we want this edge lined up like that. So now if we push this on here, we should hear a little pop. Perfect. That's it. It's pressure fit on there. It won't spin. So I do this sometimes like this, or sometimes I put the tape on it first and then push it on. But I sanded this one. I spent a lot of time sanding it so I can remove it if I give a little spin, just like that. But usually I put the tape on first, weather it, then sand the inside, then put it on, so it's finally done. But so now let's set up, clean up the workbench because I got resin everywhere, and we'll do the weathering. Okay, so we got the gaffer's tape adapter. We got the supplied tape that came with Trent's kit. The gaffer's tape adapter is just a little bit bigger than 14 millimeters, so I cut this at 15 millimeter high, and this is about 6 inches long. We're not going to use all of it, but that's that. So I just make my mark, 15 millimeter, 15 millimeter. Take my straight edge, slice it with a knife. Here's my strip. I do kind of want this end fairly straight. Because we're going to insert it here. I leave a little bit on the top and a little bit on the bottom, because then I'm going to rough it up with sandpaper. I take these Shisker Bob skewers. Like that. Making sure I have just a little bit flap on each side. That way I can rough up the edge. And this is also why I cut it a little bit bigger than 14.8 millimeters. Because when you tuck it inside this groove here, it would end up being a little short. Okay, so now go off the dove's tail here. You want to make sure you got the groove in there because you can see the groove in Brandon's Facebook profile picture. Alright, so now I got too much there, so take a knife and I'm going to saw it like I'm sawing wood here to try and roughen up the edge. Stick it on there. And if you look, I'm not cutting it right flat up against that adapter. I'm giving it just a little bit of space to have just a little bit of overhang over the adapter as I poke myself in the finger. Sawing. There we go. I don't like that though. Okay, so now that we got the tape on there, I'm going to rough up this edge a little bit more. You can't see it, can you? Just go like this. Break up the tape a little bit. You can see it, the fibers coming out of it now. Piece of sandpaper here. Rough it up. That's what I want to see, those little feather strips. I'll just hit a couple of spots so you can burn it. I mean, I'm not doing the whole thing. I do bits and pieces here and there. Okay, so now that we got that beat up a little bit, it's got a little different sheen to it. See, it's all ripped up there. We're going to use Trent's top secret agent material, Gorilla Glue. This is the Gorilla Glue Impact Tough Gel. We take that, and I usually have some throwaway paintbrushes from the dollar store here. I dab some on. This stuff smells horrible. I go just like this. Not everywhere. If you put some in the groove here, and push it down with the shish kebab skewer, it will hold it in place there pretty good. Another thing too is if you add too much, let it dry and you can lightly sand it off with some light paper. This stuff, the fumes on this is terrible though. This is Trent's tip. I don't know if you can see on the film. Alright, so now we're going to let that dry, probably about 15 minutes, and then come back. Alright, so it's dried up a little bit. Now I'm going to use this Tester's just regular black paint, model paint. Nothing fancy. And I'm going to do a little bit of dry brushing on the adapter, very lightly. on the super glue, because sometimes when you sometimes when you use this gel glue, I've noticed there is traces of white like smoke. That's why I ended up doing this little paint, because you can paint over the white traces. I'm trying to see if I have one here with white traces on it. No, but this will, you can go over that with this little tester's trick and it just works fine. I will hit the edge here to hide the white, because when we ripped it with the sandpaper and knife, there's like a crisp white line. See here? I also wet the paper towel that it's on. And we do this just to make it look old. We don't want it to look brand new. To make it disappear. See, we're making it disappear now. And this saddens me because there's not much. This is the last V2 video. We've covered everything. It's kind of bittersweet. The bottom's not too bad. I still do the bottom because if you have a flare that comes out, you don't want a brand new white flare there. Okay, so now you can see we're getting even more texture on this tape. Don't overdo it with the testers. So now we'll let that dry, and then we're going to lightly hit it with some weathering product, and it should be good to install. So we'll sit back and wait. You've seen me use this tomato weathering product before. I'll throw the item number right there. But we're just going to give it a light dusting of soot. And this seems to fall in the spots where we didn't have the super glue or model paint. Then I just take a rag and go like this, and it stays where there wasn't paint or glue. So it gives us even more to it, you know what I mean? So it really looks like the tape's older now. You can see the texture to it. So, I mean, that was nothing. You just give it a little dusting and look at the difference. Crap. Bled through into the mat. Okay. Alright, so now it's time to install this sucker. So remember, I showed you the orientation before. There we go. Gaffer tape adapter is on. So let's put the emitter on and watch her spin. Okay, next we're going to install the D-ring onto the pommel. So what I find works for me is I usually cut them with these mini bolt cutters. Some people use Dremels, hacksaws. I prefer this. Roman has a great way that he does it. I'll link that below. But I've done this so many times, I just add a little line here, a little black line here, like that, with the Sharpie. Then I use my mini bolt cutters, and I cut those right on that black line. One. You don't want to go too far with these, because if you go too far, you're going to have a gap in the pommel cube. You see how it's got like those sharp edges? I then take a file and I file the inside of those. Okay, so now that that's filed, I'm going to get out the vise, and we're going to use the vise and a pair of pliers to install the D-ring. Okay, so we're going to spread the D-ring open a little bit. These pliers are very smooth, but you could always put some Gaffers tape around them. open it about that much. Got to do this a couple times to see if I can. Nope, it's gonna work. Sometimes you have to open it up a little bit bigger to fit in the Palma Cube hole. You see what I'm doing here? I'm gonna do it this way, so you can line up. Hold it like that, and we're gonna line up the hole, the D-ring into the hole here. I'm gonna take another bite, bring it back this way. The vise is lined with Gaffers tape too. Okay, I'll take another bite. You want it nice and straight. And we're gonna pinch it closed. And if we did this right with cutting, when you push it to the edge, you can't see the cut marks. See? Perfect. Now we'll move on to tarnishing it. Now to tarnish the D-ring, I just simply take a piece of 320 sandpaper and I lightly scuff the inside in this area here because it's being clipped and unclipped out of Luke's belt. So I imagine there's some light scuffs there. Nothing serious. But I don't even know if you'll be able to see it on there. Just a little bit, see? Makes it more believable. On to the next step. Okay, so now we're going to install the cone knob and mystery chunk. So the cone knob, I age with the A14 and then buff it with steel wool and sand. Before I do that, I actually sand the top because actually in this photo here, you can see that the cone knob isn't sharp anymore from taking hits and bangs and stuff. So I just sand that off, then acid age it and buff it up. I also hit it with a coat of clear coat matte finish. You've seen me work with this stuff before. I'm a stickler for whenever you mix your metals to use some kind of grease. But this is aluminum going into aluminum, so it shouldn't be bad. But being in the automotive trade, a good friend always told me to always lubricate all moving parts. So no matter what it is, you always lubricate it. God rest his soul. Yeah, here you go, cone knob. Now the mystery chunk, I also acid age it. Before I do that, I sand it with some 120 sandpaper to make some pits in it. And then I acid age it, and it really highlights the mystery chunk. This too, I always, because now the thread, you can see the thread is also aged, so you want to make sure you lubricate the thread too. I actually, on my personal V2, snapped the head off of it, and I asked Dan if I could buy a single one. He didn't have any extras, so I had to buy a whole entire kit for another mystery chunk. So it was like a $175 mystery chunk. I gotta tighten this glove. Alright, so with this mystery chunk, once we tighten it in there, I don't know if Dan did this on purpose with the threading, because if he did, wow. But when you install it, it should be cocked just a little bit, like that. You can see it cocked in multiple photos when Hamill holds it with Brandon, and with when he catches it on the sail barge. You can see the mystery chunk's on a slight angle. Whoops! So that's that. On to the next step. Okay, it's taken me literally 45 minutes to find my E6000. Apparently my father must have jacked it from me, and freaking put it upstairs in the junk drawer. My basement has my toolboxes, all my tools, so whenever somebody needs something, they come down here and steal it, and they never put it back. So that goes with all my tools. Anyway, the rant's over. Found my E6000. So our last step is to add some fishing line to the V2. And I can't see this on screen anywhere, but Brandon has mentioned, and Scott can confirm this because Scott's actually held the prop, that the pommel had fishing line on it. So my father's been a sports fisherman his whole life, and we have tons of different rails and fishing line. So I just went into his storage and I grabbed some line, and it was much thicker. So apparently when I started researching fishing line and talking to my dad, most of the stuff he has was for sharking. So it was really big. I did some research for fishing line used in the movie industry, and they always use 4-pound fishing line, either clear, brown, or green. So I imagine they use clear on the V2, and 4-pound is far thinner than what I previously used. So if you have a V2 from me that has fishing line on it, and you want this upgraded one, I'll send you some in the mail. It's really, really nice. You can actually see it kind of disappear in some spots. Anyway, so we just this is probably too short. Brandon said it was in the pommel cube recess, so I'm figuring in here. Now if you look, if we go like this, I don't know if it's above or below the mystery chunk, but if you go below it, we have some really good shots of it below, and I can't see it. Again, you can't really see it on this screen either. But if you go above it, it kind of makes sense to me that it's above, because you can hide the string up underneath the booster, and that would explain why the scenes that we have, you can't see it. That works perfect. So I just tie a couple of knots, and I dab of E6000, let the E6000 cure, and then rub the residue off with my fingertips. If you don't have somebody holding it, it's going to be a real difficult part. It's not going to be tight enough. Alright, so I got another idea. Okay, so I just run the fishing line underneath the mystery chunk up top here, put a piece of tape here to hold it, and this will make tying the knot much easier. Here we go. You can't even see, well, you can't even see it now. I bet you they use this. And I know for a fact they still use this fishing line today in the industry, because R2-D2 in The Force Awakens, when he's moving around, is actually pulled with fishing string. And I know that for a fact because the droid builders, the R2-D2's Builders Club, they're on there, and they've said it to me. Now I'm just going to do a little dab on the knot so it doesn't come untied. Just a little dab like that. And I'm not dabbing it onto the hilt, I'm dabbing it onto the knot to hold the knot from becoming undone. I love this stuff. Well, we just got to add a little Nike swoosh, and we're good. When it dries too, I'm going to take that knot and move it away so it's not in line with the polymer cube, because we know you can't see the knot in the photos, so we got to hide it. Preferably probably near the mystery chunk underneath it, because we don't have a good shot of that. But almost done. Should be ready. She'll be shipping this week, so I hope the owner of it is happy, and I'm glad the owner let me document everything about it to share with you guys. That's that. This video has now concluded the V2 series. We have covered all the bases and the steps. I couldn't have brought you this series without the help of other members here, so I want to give a special shout out to those who have contributed. I want to start with a big thank you to Brandon Ellinger, the owner of the V2 today. Without him posting the photos back in 2015 at Celebration 7 and his Facebook profile picture, we wouldn't have the replica we have today. Special thank you to Brandon. The next big thank you is to Dan. He goes by Anakin Starkiller on the RPF. Thank you for supplying us with these gorgeous and most accurate V2s to date. I also want to thank Dan's mom and his wife for helping him package everything up. Because of them, Dan got these V2s shipped out faster than ever before. Special thank you to the Starkiller family. Another big thank you is to Roy at Wannawanga. Roy not only supplies the most beautiful clamp levers we have today, but he also has accurate D-rings for the V2. Many of you may or may not know, but Roy worked with Dan scaling and 3D modeling the V2. They compared their models and measurements and dialed the V2 into where she is today. Big thank you to Roy. I remember a time when there wasn't any replica clamps available to the market. That's when Roman from Romanprops stepped up to the plate and started supplying us with these gorgeous replicas we have today. Thank you very much, Roman. We all really appreciate it. Another thank you is to Scott. Scott is a professional prop maker who actually has held the V2 in his own hands. He can't share everything about it, but respectfully has shared some key features that appear on it. There are still plenty mysteries about the V2, but I want to thank Scott for giving his hands-on advice to Dan and Roy. Thank you, Scott. And now a special thank you to Trent. Trent has stared at these pictures longer than anyone else on the planet. He's dialed in every chip, every nick, and nicknamed each one. And now gotten these stencils to where they're scary accurate to the real prop. Without his stencils and attention to detail, the V2 wouldn't have the caliber of finish it does today. We, the community, really appreciate you, Trent, investing so much of your time and research in delivering such an affordable product. I also personally appreciate the friendship we have made over this project and seriously look forward to the next project we can work on together. It truly saddens me that this magnificent journey has come to an end. I've learned so much and had so much fun and made so many new friends. I truly, truly appreciate you all. But this isn't the end. There are many more projects to come, and I hope to see you all there with me. Hallowax, out.